I think it is hard to deny that INFJs by and large are misrepresented in the media, misrepresented in fiction to a large extent. And it's interesting to try to understand why that is the case. I've come to the conclusion that perhaps INFJs are misrepresented for the simple reason that the vast majority of INFJs are normal people, and that in order to make a compelling work of fiction, you can't really work with normal people. All these people have to be kind of exceptional in some way or distorted in some other way so that they're striking. That they're striking, and the majority of people upon this earth, they're not particularly striking. They're trying to get by, and they have particular traits that, maybe fiction cannot exploit that well. One thing that I've noticed is that, that I have proposed to divide the INFJ between three subtypes in terms of modes of being. The adaptive submissive INFJ, the one who's focused on getting along with other people, terribly afraid of conflict, willing to repress their NI for the sake of this sense of belonging. The solipsistic INFJ, who is in some way the inverse of the adaptive and who is rejecting the world and tends to live in their own self-contained NI world. And then the liberated or spiritualized INFJ, who in many ways is a transcendence of the adaptive and the solipsist, who's able to reconcile the external world of socialization, duties, constraints, and so on, and the NI world, which is the world of creative fantasy, of relationship to the archetypes, and so on. It seems to me that in a lot of media, in a lot of fiction, what you encounter is either the spiritualized INFJ or some derivation of a spiritualized INFJ when you encounter an INFJ, or like the kind of evil INFJ who is great for a villain, but is a kind of inverted spiritualized INFJ. They have those qualities, but they are dedicating those qualities to evil ends, right? Sometimes you might argue that you encounter solipsist INFJs among INFJ villains, but it's not quite accurate, because INFJ villains tend to be quite proactive, which is why they're dangerous. And that is not something that defines the solipsistic INFJ. The solipsistic INFJ withdraws from the world by default. This is what they do, and you can't really have a villain that does this. So paradoxically, although the spiritualized INFJ, according to this book, The Infinite Soul, which you can still get, by the way, it's actually fresh out of the oven. It's only a few months old. INFJ Life in the Modern World, which is about how to lead a life that is productive, meaningful, and valuable as an INFJ in a world that is often hostile to us. All links are below. If you have got the book but not reviewed it yet, you know that reviews really help me with referencing, so please consider it. I insist on the fact that spiritualization or liberation, if you prefer that term, it's a path that takes a long time, like you need learning, you need conflict, you need resolution of conflicts, you need failure, you need to learn from failure, you need humility. It's even when you have all these various conditions, attaining spiritualization is something that is very difficult, is challenging. It might not be attainable on a completely continuous basis, but more so in sequences or phases. So obviously there's a misrepresentation in media and fiction, and on Netflix and movies and so on, and books. Not necessarily in the sense that the INFJs that are in those works are complete distortions. They are sometimes partial, but nevertheless somewhat accurate distortions, but of a very specific subtype, namely the spiritualized INFJ, who is really posited, and I think credibly posited, to be rare, to be very rare. So if there was a correct representation of INFJs in those media, we would see many more adaptive submissive INFJs and solipsistic INFJs. The rarest is the adaptive submissive, because in some ways, from a fictional point of view, is the one that is the least striking. And I would be ready to wager that when that type of INFJ is represented, a lot of the time people mistake them for ISFJs or perhaps even ISTJs, because they seem to fit those traits more and people don't see the NI at work. It's so interesting to encounter a work of fiction where those other INFJ subtypes are represented, because it can be super interesting as a learning experience, encountering these types that we often ourselves are, because again, spiritualization is so hard to attain. So it's a really interesting learning experience, and also like it's a tour de force, fictionally speaking, to be able to make a really compelling fictional character that is belonging to those types that on paper are not as suited for the fictional world perhaps as the spiritualized INFJ. Now, I really suspect that this applies to all types. And again, you know, one of the mottos of this book is there's a unique way to be a certain person as an INFJ, or to have a particular quality through an INFJ prism, but that quality could perfectly be had through an INTP prism or an ISFP prism or what have you. What we're interested in is the INFJ perspective, and that's my view on INFJs in fiction. But let me know what you think in the comments, and particularly if you have examples of non-spiritualized fictional INFJs that you think are credibly INFJs, please share, from books, from movies, from whatever, because I'm hungry to encounter more of them. And perhaps there are some that I've encountered and I just can't bring them to mind right now. Don't forget that previous to the Infinite Soul, the prequel, is the Ecstatic Soul, released in 2021, starting to date back a little bit. It's more about the contents of INFJ consciousness. It's a pretty in-depth analysis with philosophical insights as well. So you can still get it. Check the reviews. The link is below, the Ecstatic Soul. And the lifeblood of my channel, as you know, is my Patreon page. So if you would like to support my channel to help me keep going with my production of video content, if you like my work, there's a link to Patreon. You can become a supporter from anywhere from €3 a month, $3.50. You can also interact with me there, make suggestions, because I'm always really on the hunt for suggestions. I need new suggestions for videos, so you can interact with me there. And we do some young readings as well. And, you know, there's a community that's growing. Thank you so much to my current supporters, and please consider it. See you next time, guys. Bye-bye.